You then came up with a new approach of trying to see these letters. So you started talking about machine learning as a way to tell the ink apart from the papyrus. How did that come about?
Yeah, in parallel to the work that we were doing with high energy physics and with conventional computer vision, and I'm a conventionally trained computer vision specialist, what was happening in the world was the emergence of machine vision, machine learning and deep learning. And it just so happened that my time at Google in Paris in the early aughts, about 2012, put me in touch with my manager at the time. Steve Crossan was the founder of the Cultural Institute at Google, and he hired me to be a visiting scientist at Google. He went on to join DeepMind in London, which was acquired by Google. And then Steve joined the team that actually did protein folding and won ultimately a Nobel Prize. So they were developing the deep learning required to solve that problem while I was pounding away on this other thing. And in our communication, Steve kept telling me, there are these deep learning approaches that can help with teasing out really complex signals. And you might ought to think in that direction. And I took that seriously. And we realized, this might be the perfect candidate for basically an analytical AI approach, not generative AI, right? But analytical AI, where we use an AI framework, a deep learning framework, to learn what we're trying to get and to amplify that. And that's exactly what happened.
You're trying to teach the AI essentially the difference between this is what ink looks like, this is what no ink looks like. And if you can train it, you can then hopefully get it to read the rest of the scans.
Yeah, and I use the term analytical as opposed to generative because we're not talking about a really high-level process that says we understand language or we understand letter forms. This is a very low level. Like I say, all politics is local, right? The solution was very localized. If I have this very small region, I'm teaching the deep learning framework that in this very small region, this is what ink looks like. And then over here in this other really small region, this is what it looks like when there's no ink. And it turns out that the deep learning framework can understand how to analyze those two different sets of labels and then discriminate between them very, very well.
And so after this, you then changed your approach again because you then set up a contest, essentially, the Vesuvius challenge. So what was behind the thinking there? So you've got machine learning as an approach. Was that just too big a scale of a problem to do with your lab, or how did the whole Vesuvius challenge thing come about?
Well, at that point, we realized that we had solved the problem technically, and we had evidence to that effect from all of our scans of open fragments. But then we were faced with the fact that while the solution might be local, reading an entire scroll is a global question, where you have to put all the local bits together into a global thing. And we didn't have the horsepower to actually do that work within my team. We have 5 people. And so when presented with the idea, now you have to realize I didn't come up with the idea of the Vesuvius Challenge or a contest. That was an idea pitched to me by my co-founder, Nat Friedman. But when he presented me with that idea, and I actually noodled on it for a while, I realized, this is actually pretty brilliant because it's exactly what we need now to do the next step. And that is tune the AI and make it better so that the deep learning can produce ink that actually will allow somebody to read this. And then generate all the surface area of the interior of the scroll that represents the whole book, not just a tiny piece of it that sort of proves that we can do it scientifically.
So how does the contest work?
Yeah, the initial phase of the contest essentially required us to open up everything we had done, our software, all of our data, all of our techniques, so that we could ask contestants to join in. And in fact, we did more than that. What we did is we focused the contestants not on the broad research context, because we had already defined much of that, but we focused them in on the tuning of the AI. Everything else we did the virtual unwrapping, we did the segmentation, which means, finding where the layers are in this really twisted mess, and then presenting those layers to the community and saying, okay, you can't see anything here with the naked eye, but we know that if you use the right AI parameters, you will be able to enhance this and see the ink. Go do it. And by doing that, we succeeded. We succeeded in creating a large section of text from inside a scroll that had never been read before.
Was that a hard decision to make? Because it's almost like you've run an entire marathon. You've put so much into this over years, and then the sort of finish line is in sight, and you're kind of handing over the baton to someone else to get all the glory, do that last little bit, and be the one to read the scroll.
Yeah, it was hard. As researchers, we're kind of trained in this system that values, your own contribution, the things that you can claim to be your own. But at the end of the day, I wasn't really looking at it as giving up glory, right? But I was looking at it instead as increasing the glory. And not just for me, but for everyone who could join with me to get across the finish line. I actually thought about this pretty deeply and realized that the concept of glory, it's not a zero-sum game, right? I mean, glory can actually increase and cover many, many people who join in. It's not something to think selfishly about necessarily, although that's what we do, right? Naturally, we think it's zero-sum, either I get glory or I do not get glory. I think that history showed it was the right decision. And honestly, here's another analogy. The reason why we have Homer and the Iliad and the Odyssey is because whoever wrote those poems allowed them to be distributed widely around the ancient world and performed. Had they hoarded it together, that would probably be in the canon that is now lost, because we've lost 90% of the things from the ancient world. People hoarding them, things not being disseminated. So actually, the best way to make sure that work gets attention and is inspiring is to release it. And it's counterintuitive, but that's my thinking.
And you had huge engagement. I mean, hundreds of teams, I think. So
thousands, yeah.
Wow. So yeah, were you blown away by that?
It was incredibly gratifying. Not overwhelming. We were ready. We were hoping. But yeah, incredibly gratifying. I was really surprised by the interest that went way beyond just the technical. Because again, I thought maybe my experience was unique at feeling so compelled by these ancient objects and their histories. But it turns out that a lot of people who are maybe computer scientists or they haven't studied the classics, and yet they have this curiosity, that is really inspiring to me. These are mainly younger people, but they still have this fire, this sort of sacred fire to understand our past and to think outside their discipline and to be curious about it.
Like we said, it's been like 20 years to get to this point that now you are reading what's inside. You're reading paragraphs. You can see what's there. So what were the first words that were revealed on the very first scroll that you were able to read?
The first word that popped out from one of our contestants was the word purple, porphyros. And
Such a great word.
It's a great word. I actually think it is a very deep word. It's connected to, wealth and power in the ancient world, typically used in a context of, clothing and other things that are symbolic, right, of wealth, power. It could have been a word that was just a conjunction or a preposition or something else in Greek that no one cares about. But it ends up being that word. And you know what? The manuscript itself ended up being about scarcity and abundance. And so purple actually, in one word, right, captured the whole, summary of the manuscript. I think it's profound.
Yeah, it's magical. And so you've read good amounts of text in at least two different scrolls, so Greek philosophical texts, and you've scanned quite a few more, haven't you?
We had a great first phase of the Vesuvius challenge, and that opened up a tremendous number of doors to be able to go, first of all, and collect more data across the collection. Realize that there are probably 400 full scrolls or fragments of scrolls that are available to be scanned that have never been scanned. So we're acquiring more data. And that's something the Vesuvius Challenge can do and is good at. We have full-time staff now working as part of the Vesuvius Challenge to improve the tooling that allows the contestants to then level up and do more sophisticated analysis without having to do that work themselves, that engineering work, and then adding more and more data. And you know that machine learning approaches escalate in their capability with the increase in the amount of data that you can feed in. And so we're hoping that we end up with a kind of Uber approach that has seen so much of the papyrus that it's just always perfect at finding layers, at enhancing the ink, at solving the problem.
What kept you going all of this time? Like, so many people thought that this was going to be impossible. So what kept you believing that this was possible and kept you going at the challenge?
We're not always great at self-reflection. So I'm not sure I can always untangle everything about myself. I just knew that we could do it. And I had invested so much in proving that to be the case that I just didn't want to release until I got there. And it didn't necessarily have to be me alone, right, on top of that mountain. So that was part of the decision to open up the Vesuvius Challenge. But we really did plant that flag before we even started the contest. We knew that we had the technique that would work. Scaling it up has been the magnificence of so many people joining with us, and then also producing not just the local test of, oh, we can see the ink in one letter form, right? But the magnificence of being able to read a book. And so having gotten to that place, I know looking back that I was right not to give up.
You have a realistic chance now of reading not just a couple of scrolls, but the whole library, or a good part of the whole library. What is your dream to find in that library? What are you really hoping is going to be in there?
I want to find something that, first of all, demonstrates we can read more of what was preserved intact than anything that was opened physically. I want to find something that demonstrates the virtuosity of the technology itself, because I really believe in it, and I believe in virtual unwrapping as a thing that we invented, right, to solve this problem. That answers the question on a technical level, but on a textual level, I would love to find a history, like maybe one of the lost volumes of the History of Rome by Livy, or maybe something else that testifies to what was going on in the ancient world at the time that we don't even know about. And the reason why is that a history book is kind of like asking the genie for 3 more wishes, right? You know, it's like you get more than just a story. You get other information about the ancient world. The philosophical texts, like the Epicurean stuff, is really interesting, but it's really pretty insular too, because it just talks about philosophical ideas. Imagine if we could find a history about what else was going on in the ancient world, detailing things that we don't know about. That's what I would love to find, and I would like it to challenge the canon, challenge what we think we know, and then advance it.